Mutant Massacre is one of the earliest crossover stories to gain success, so much success that crossovers became a regular thing at Marvel. In this absolutely classic and amazing story arc from 1986, the combined force of X-Men and X-Factor comes face to face with the Marauders, who want to annihilate the Morlocks, an underground community of mutants. Also, Thor joins the fray. Without spending any more time in the intro, let's long read the marvelously exciting Mutant Massacre event. Mysterious disappearances. Mutant Massacre wastes no time and starts off with a visual of an attack. In a Los Angeles rail yard, Richard Sammons, a merc hired by the Hellfire Club, is brutally attacked as his girlfriend Tommy, a Morlock mutant, looks on in horror. The Morlocks are a band of social outcasts who, owing to their non-human appearance and mutant powers, live in the sewers under New York City. Sammons, barely managing to stay alive, begs Tommy to hand him his gun and help him fight off the attackers. Frightened for her life, Tommy runs away through train tracks, all the while thinking about being away from home and why she's being targeted. As she's climbing aboard a train carriage to make her escape, she hears a gunshot and assumes the worst. Realizing the door of the rail car is locked, she uses her powers to slip inside. However, Tom is unaware of the dangers lurking right outside as the assailants who murdered Sammons are revealed as the Marauders, who are closing in on the rail carriage. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, the mutant known as Dazzler is forced to hide her identity and has been disguising herself as Allison Blair, a band member of Lila Cheney. She lashes out at the other band members for insisting she join them for the after party. Retiring to the band bus, she splashes her face with water while contemplating how tired she is of hiding her true self. Her mutant power of converting sound to pure light has made her a social outcast, and while the band knows her secret, the only way for her to be normal is to keep up the lie. She is indebted to Lila Cheney, but hates it and wishes that she didn't need anyone to make it on her own and prove herself to her father. As she looks up, she's surprised to see the reflection in the mirror. With Allison's naturally blonde hair, Malice introduces herself, claiming she's the real Allison as she emerges from the mirror. She tells Allison she's the real deal, a star who's been denied her opportunity to shine. She grabs Allison by the neck, telling her to stop resisting. There's a bright flash of light as Allison tells Malice to get away. This knocks her unconscious, and as Allison comes to, she realizes the intensity of the light blast she generated. Realizing the mysterious entity who was posing as her has left, she checks her reflection again. Satisfied by the exhausted face looking back at her, she chalks up the incident to a tired mind playing tricks on her. Noticing a choker that suddenly appears around her neck, she comments on how well it suits her. On a weekday morning, sleepy commuters pouring in from the suburbs into Manhattan are shocked awake from their drowsiness by an unusual sight. Rogue, a mutant from the Uncanny X-Men team, flies across as they're stuck in traffic. She's investigating the disappearance of Rachel Summers, aka Phoenix. The gadget on her wrist indicates no sign of the mutant, and she blames herself for abandoning the young mutant who needed her the most. As she continues her search, Rogue notices a broken window washing scaffolding. She rushes to help the workers who are in a freefall. After expertly tossing the platform into the East River, Rogue saves the two workers. They thank her and offer to kiss her as Rogue politely declines and flies away. As she contemplates the effects of her mutant ability to absorb memories and powers through physical touch, she catches a glimpse of her reflection in the windows of a building. Shocked at the unkempt woman staring back, she decides to continue looking for Phoenix till the shops open. Unsuccessful in locating Phoenix, Rogue decides to fix herself up and steps into Bloomingdale's, the luxury department store chain. Trying on new clothes, she feels guilty about giving up her search and wonders whether Phoenix is still alive. While internally agreeing that it's a cruel thought, it's arguably the best outcome given the circumstances. She asks the girl at the makeup counter to give her a makeover. And while admiring herself in the mirror, she's confronted by a customer who asks her to leave, saying mutants shouldn't mingle with humans. He threatens to call X-Factor, and Rogue, unbothered by his threat, tells him to do so and asks who they are. One of the workers Rogue rescued earlier steps in and defends Rogue, and in the kerfuffle, Rogue flies off with her haul. She flies by a bus splattered with an advertisement of X-Factor and decides to warn Storm about it when she gets back. If you're liking this video and our efforts up until now, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. They may be two small clicks for you, but they help us in marvelous ways. Now, let's continue. Meanwhile, at Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, also known as the X-Mansion, Illyana Rasputin is visiting her brother Colossus. He has his old X-Men costume on, and after a bit of sibling ribbing, she hugs him, commenting on his beautiful sketches. Holding up a picture of Shadowcat, aka Kitty Pryde, Illyana admits she's worried about her after what happened to Nightcrawler and Phoenix. Colossus admits he's worried too and resolves to set things right and bring them back. Downstairs, in the professor's study, Shadowcat uses her phasing powers to modify Cerebro to make it accessible to everyone and not just mutants with psionic powers. She seeks validation from Lockheed the Dragon as Illyana and Colossus walk in. The three talk about their missing teammates as Kitty admits she's angry at Phoenix for abandoning them when they needed her the most. and that fighting Nimrod took almost everything out of them, maybe even Nightcrawler. She calls Phoenix selfish and asks Colossus what he'd do if the person he trusted and loved betrayed him. Colossus reminds her that people can change, and offering them a second chance is the best bet, as Magneto, who was once the X-Men's sworn enemy, is now headmaster at the school. Just then, Cerebro sounds the signal of the location of a lost teammate. In Manhattan, Magneto descends onto the streets and gracefully changes into a presentable suit. The avenue is thronged with journalists as Magneto heads over to the Hellfire Club. On his way, he overhears a policeman talking with the members of X-Factor, clearly unaware that they're mutants. He recognizes the X-Factor members as Cyclops, Beast, Angel, Iceman, and Marvel Girl, the only remaining members of the first X-Men team. The mutants notice Magneto as well and decide to observe him and let him make a move first. Magneto doesn't and enters the club instead, all the while wondering how the professor's first batch of students could participate in the persecution of the fellow mutants and give up on their leader's ideals. He meets with the Lords Cardinal, comprising Sebastian Shaw, Selene, and Emma Frost, who ask him to join their ranks and take his place as the White King. He's shocked at the offer, as they were fighting on opposite sides as early as the previous night. Shaw points out that they need to put the personal differences aside and band together against their common enemies. After some thought, Magneto agrees to consider the proposition. Meanwhile, in a rundown warehouse, Nightcrawler is being chased by humans who are intent on killing him. Overpowered and tired, he's cornered by the mob. Shadowcat, Colossus, and Illyana arrive right on time, and Colossus decides to confront the mob instead of having Illyana teleport Nightcrawler out. The mob inform him that a group of radioactive mutants attack nearby and they want to get their revenge. Colossus tries to reason with them as Shadowcat steps in and makes a big speech about prejudice. The mob leave them as Nightcrawler admits he's lost his teleportation powers. Wolverine and Storm are at the Delacorte Theater, where he informs her that Phoenix's trail goes cold. Storm asks him whether they can do anything else to try and locate Phoenix. Wolverine tells her he did enough when he tried to kill her, as Storm reminds him that the X-Men are a team and she's their leader. As the two mutants hold hands, Wolverine promises to stick by the X-Men to the end. At the railway tunnel beneath Park Avenue, Tommy slips out of the train car and is momentarily happy to have made her way home safe. She's ambushed by the Marauders, who knock her down with an energy spear. Standing over her, one of them tells her that she was let go so that she could lead them right to the Morlocks, and cocks his gun. He tells her she won't be alone where she's going, and a loud boom follows, signaling the worst. Let's meet X-Factor. In Central Park, Freedom Force, a group of mutant bounty hunters who are working for the government, try to take Rusty Collins, aka Firefist, in. He conjures up a wall of fire to protect himself and skids. Lob is instructed by Mystique, the leader of the Freedom Force, to get them, and he walks through the fire, closing in on the duo. As they're trying to escape, Skids asks Rusty why the government is after him, as Rusty says his mutant powers manifested while he was serving in the army, and he accidentally set a woman on fire and ran away in panic. The X-Factor saved him while he was on the run, and he explains to Skids that he was at Central Park to warn the X-Factor of incoming trouble. Avalanche of the Freedom Force uses his seismic powers to knock the duo out with a wall of earth. Skids uses her force field powers to protect herself and tells Rusty to grab on. Rusty tells her his grip keeps slipping and asks her to lower the force field. She assures him that her force field keeps her protected from his fire powers, and the duo continue fleeing as Skids asks Rusty whether it was the mutant hunting group, the X-Factor, that rescued him. Rusty tells her the X-Factor are much more than what they seem, and that they track mutants for a reason. Across the park, the X-Factor are on their way to save Rusty when civilians and journalists block their path. Trish Tilby of WARC News asks Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, for a comment on the X-Factor's presence on the scene of an ongoing mutant clash. Cyclops tells Trish they're simply responding to a call from a city official reporting the clash who requested their intervention. A policeman standing nearby thanks them for their service and tells them he saw them on the television fighting the radioactive mutants and saving the city. He adds that the X-Factor's actions make him proud to be human. Cyclops thanks him for their trust and asks him why the Avengers who are closer weren't summoned. The policeman tells him he'd prefer calling his own kind for help, as Marvel Girl angrily retorts that the Avengers aren't mutants. The policeman ignores her completely, and just as Marvel Girl is about to confront him, Angel, aka Warren Worthington, intervenes, pulling her away. As the X-Factor go on their way, they're hounded with questions as Iceman says they have no further comments. The members then talk amongst themselves as Marvel Girl says she understands why humans fear mutants as the park has been destroyed. Iceman comments he'd like to get his hands on the criminals, as Beast, aka Hank McCoy, who's still in human form, reminds his teammates they caused similar destruction in their time as X-Men. Angel says that their X-Men days are well beyond them, as Marvel Girl tells them that their purpose has changed too, as they pose as humans and hunt their fellow mutants to save them from persecution. She interrupts herself and points Magneto out to Cyclops. Marvel Girl goes to confront him, but Angel stops her again as she tries to break free. She can't believe that Magneto, a criminal, walked past the policeman without consequences. Cyclops agrees and tells her that it's normal for Magneto to walk around freely in a world where the erstwhile Brotherhood of Evil Mutants rebranded themselves as the Freedom Force and now work for the government, and where the leader of the X-Men has recently joined the Hellfire Club. He's just glad that the Professor isn't a witness to the betrayal. Warren reminds his teammates of their original mission, to get to Rusty before the Freedom Force does. Meanwhile, as Rusty and Skids are escaping, Rusty thinks they're safe as Skids tells him about the Morlocks. She explains that a bunch of mutants live underground in a huge tunnel and that they'd be safe there. As Skids talks about living a peaceful and hassle-free life, the duo run into Spider-Woman's intricate psionic web as Skids tries to pry Rusty out. Rusty tells Skids to leave him and run, but she's adamant to not leave his side. Blob of the Freedom Force interrupts and tells his teammate Pyro to set Skids on fire. Pyro points out that Skids is immune to fire as the mob who was hounding X-Factor earlier mistakes Rusty and Skids for humans who were under attack by the mutants of the Freedom Force. As X-Factor is nowhere to be seen, the crowd decide to take matters into their own hands to save Rusty and Skids and start hurling glass bottles. The policeman threatens to shoot as Blob points out that bullets can't hurt him. Hearing the commotion, X-Factor rushes to the scene as the crowd keeps hurling bottles at the Freedom Force. Blob threatens violence if they continue, but Mystique tells him to behave as he's a government official. She raises her hand, telling the crowd to stop, and announces that they're officers of the law, making an arrest. Another bottle comes flying, and in the nick of time, Destiny, using her powers of premonition, saves Mystique from a fatal injury. Someone in the crowd holds up a crate of eggs as the mob begins to egg the Freedom Force. In the mayhem, Rusty is free as Skids points out that they need to escape. Meanwhile, X-Factor make their way to the front and Iceman points out that Freedom Force is being stoned. Marvel Girl says they need to intervene and stop the humans. Iceman asks why, as the mob is doing a good thing, as Beast reminds them that approving attacks on any mutant sets a dangerous precedent, and grabbing a civilian's arm who had an egg in his hand and was raring to go, adds that if they don't stop them now, people would get hurt, including the humans. The man who was ready to yoke a Freedom Force mutant asks Beast whether he's jealous they're doing X-Factor's work, as another aims his yoky weapon at Avalanche. Scott asks Marvel Girl to conjure up a psi bubble around Freedom Force as the X-Factor decides to take action. The mob realizes they're not hitting the mutants anymore, as Scott uses technological jargon as he tells the crowd that the X-Factor used a high-tech encasement force screen. Mystique flashes her badge from the psi bubble, saying that the X-Factor's actions could have legal repercussions. Meanwhile, Rusty and Skids make their escape underground following the tunnel system. Up on the surface, the X-Factor unwillingly lets the Freedom Force go, much to the disappointment of the civilians. The X-Factor is relieved that Rusty has escaped. Freedom Force, on the other hand, is determined to capture Rusty as their pardon depends on it. As the X-Factor are walking away to regroup, the journalist Trish Tilby confronts them, asking the hard questions. What exactly is X-Factor's purpose? Meanwhile, at the X-Factor's base of operations, a mute young mutant by the name of Artie Maddox that the X-Factor had rescued telepathically sees Rusty and Skids making their way to the Morlocks tunnels, followed by the Freedom Force and headed directly into the Marauders. He runs to inform Cameron Hodge, the PR director for the X-Factor, about the impending doom, but she ignores him and throws him out. Determined to save his hero and friend, he decides to leave a message for the X-Factor and leaves to save Rusty and Skids. Later, as the X-Factor returns, they see a drawing of Artie with his hands outstretched, calling for help. Rusty and Skids in the tunnels in Hodge's office as Marvel Girl clarifies that since Artie is mute, he can only communicate by projecting images of what he sees and drawing them. Meanwhile, Artie, wearing one of Rusty's old jackets, uses the secret tunnel underneath the X-Factor's building to get to the Morlocks hideout. He's telepathically tracking Rusty and is stopped in his tracks by a mysterious figure. Meanwhile, X-Factor decides to go after Artie and Rusty and shrug off their X-Factor personas and costumes. As Angel frees his wings and Iceman ices it up, they declare themselves as Exterminators. The mysterious figure that Artie met in the tunnels turns out to be the Morlocks Leech, who takes Artie to Caliban. The trio hear a loud screech as Caliban turns around in fright. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the tunnels, Rusty exclaims in shock that he tripped over a body as Skids tries to silence him. The Freedom Force are still tracking them as Mystique asks Destiny whether she can sense them. Blob yanks Rusty out of his hiding place and bashes his head against the walls of the tunnels. The Exterminators enter as Cyclops shoots an optic blast at Blob's arm and a fight breaks out. As the Exterminators gain the upper hand, Destiny tells Mystique that staying in the tunnels will surely kill them and that they must leave. After the battle, the Freedom Force retreat as the Exterminators realize Rusty is gravely injured. Cyclops instructs Angel to fly Marvel Girl and Rusty back to the X-Factor headquarters as Iceman, Beast, and him find Artie. Skids expresses her wish to go with Rusty. As Archangel tries to hold on to her while flying, Skids says it's impossible to get a grip on her, thus her unusual name. Beast, Cyclops, and Iceman continue looking for Artie as they hear another scream while Artie, Caliban, and Leech are crouched in fear as mutants are slaughtered nearby. At the Pentagon offices, Valerie Cooper, The employer of Freedom Force gives them a talking to for losing to a novice group of evil mutants. As they exit the office, Blob asks Mystique why she didn't reveal the truth about the exterminators. Mystique says she plans on exposing Warren Worthington, aka Angel, as an evil mutant by tipping off Trish Telby. Marauders vs. X-Men. The Marauders scalp hunter introduces himself and his team of mutant killers to the Morlocks before cocking his gun and shooting at them. Riptide then introduces himself and uses his spinning powers, hurls ninja stars and spikes, killing even more Morlocks. As a Morlock with powers of invulnerability tries to attack them, Scrambler, a Marauder, disrupts the Morlock's power with a simple touch. Scalp hunter shoots the Morlock down. In the milieu, a young Morlock with acid sweat tries to escape and inform the Morlock leader Callisto of the intruders, and is hunted down by the Marauders Arclight and Harpoon. Seeing the little girl breathe her last, Callisto challenges the Marauders. The Morlocks seem to be on shaky ground, quite literally, as the Marauders Vertigo and Arclight use their powers to disorient and disarm the Morlocks. As all seems to be lost, the Morlock Piper, hidden away in a corner, plays his flute to summon the sewer animals who close in on the Marauders. Meanwhile, at the School for Gifted Youngsters, it's a peaceful afternoon as the mutants comprising a new batch of students and the older X-Men team finally have a much-needed break from all the fighting and catch up on some chores. Danny Moonstar is bathing her horse Brightwind as Colossus and Rogue are putting bales of hay in the barn. The two are then approached by Wolverine, who asks them whether he can help. Colossus assures Wolverine they're getting by fine, as Rogue asks him to rest as he's been injured pretty badly of late and that even his body, reinforced with adamantium, the strongest metal, needs time to heal. He tells Rogue he's fine, and as Rogue calls him out for his no-care attitude, he clenches his fist and his claws come out instinctively. He slices the rake with his claws and walks away, leaving Colossus and Rogue to wonder why he's in such a mood. Colossus worries Logan is hiding something as he's healed from worse injuries quicker. In the kitchen, Kitty raids the fridge looking for snacks as Magneto walks in, saying that the cans of soda bundled up in her arms are surely going to ruin her appetite. She tells him she's preparing for her upcoming examinations and needs to refuel as she doesn't want to fail and let her parents down. Magneto agrees and excuses her, but is quick to remind her to not make it a habit. Kitty phases through the ceiling and onto the upper floor in the room where her best friend Ileana Rasputin and her pet dragon Lockheed were waiting a much-needed snack break. Wolverine is out for a walk on the school grounds where Nightcrawler tries to teleport and surprise him. Instead, Wolverine catches his limp body as Nightcrawler is still weak. Wolverine asks him what the mutant wanted to prove as Nightcrawler replies he thought he'd regained his strength. Nightcrawler tells Wolverine they're a pair of battered mutants who feel useless without their powers. The mutants decide to find solace at the bottom of a bottle, and as they're about to flip a coin to decide whose treat it is, a Morlock emerges suddenly from the ground asking the X-Men for help with the little breath that he has left and dies in front of them. In the infirmary, the nurse covers the dead Morlock with a white sheet and lists his injuries. Psylocke, aka Betsy Braddock, a new student at the school, tells the gathered mutants that in the dying Morlock's memories, she was able to see evil mutants slaughtering Morlocks. Magneto is shocked and recalls his childhood, saying that the mutant persecution is similar to the Holocaust. Wolverine asks Storm for their plan of action. Storm says that she's the Morlocks leader as well and they need to help them. Magneto's asked to remain behind to look after the new mutants and protect them if the school is targeted. Ileana, aka Magic, teleports the team to the Morlock tunnels. They carefully move ahead and are met with a scene of horror. Scattered across the floor are Morlock bodies, some dead, some barely alive, some injured, and among them, Callisto. Kitty's unable to stomach the smell, which reminds her of a slaughterhouse she'd been to as she mourns the loss of some of her close friends. Vertigo attacks as the X-Men are blindsided by Riptide, who hurls blades at them. As Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine had gone up against Vertigo before, they're able to resist her powers and focus instead on deflecting Riptide's blades. Colossus shields the team with his steel body as Rogue complains her outfit is being ripped. Wolverine uses his claws to slash through the blades as Nightcrawler knocks out Vertigo with multiple teleportations. Weak and exhausted from exerting himself too much, Nightcrawler is unable to teleport out of harm's way as Riptide slashes his blades through him, leaving him gravely injured. He flees with Vertigo, leaving the X-Men to tend to Nightcrawler. Storm instructs Magic to teleport the wounded to the X-Mansion and have them tended to. She gives her clear instructions to stay at the school. Storm, with the X-Men and Callisto behind her, decide to focus on saving Morlocks first and then fighting the Marauders. Meanwhile, Scalp Hunter goes after Anna Lee, who has the power of empathy, and the Morlocks she was protecting. He shoots them in cold blood as Colossus and Kitty hear the gunshot and head on to its direction. Finding the Marauders Arclight and Scalp Hunter, Colossus hurls a rock at them, but Arclight shatters just before impact. Arclight punches Colossus, sending him flying into a wall. Kitty, looking for Colossus, is held at gunpoint by Scalp Hunter, who pulls the trigger without a second thought. The bullet passes right through Kitty's head, thanks to her phasing powers. Kitty decides to save Colossus rather than take down Scalp Hunter, which sends her into a philosophical dilemma. Elsewhere, the rest of the X-Men are leading the Mutant Massacre survivors through the tunnels when they're suddenly stopped in the tracks by an optic blast. Before they can go check, an explosion ensues as Colossus and Kitty rejoin the X-Men along with the dying Anna Lee. Before dying, Annalie tells Callisto Scalp Hunter killed her children. Before the X-Men can react, they're again confronted by the Marauders Scrambler, Riptide, and Harpoon. Scrambler goes for Storm, intending to disrupt her powers of weather manipulation as she and Callisto band together to rough him up. Harpoon and Wolverine are both injured by each other as Riptide, seeing his teammates losing, hurls blades, indiscriminately killing and maiming mutants. Colossus fights Harpoon as Scrambler tries to take away Rogue's powers, not knowing that the powers are similar. The encounter leaves Rogue vulnerable to an attack by Harpoon as Kitty selflessly intervenes and is hit by the energy spear. Hearing Kitty screams, Colossus has had enough and snaps Riptide's neck and is determined to do the same to Harpoon. As he runs back, he realizes Harpoon and Scrambler have fled. Storm tries to pick Kitty up but horrifically realizes she's stuck in a phasing state. Storm is angered by the loss, and as the rest of them make their way to the X-Mansion, Storm instructs Wolverine to bring her a Marauder as a prisoner and gives him the liberty to do what he does best with the rest. Clipped wings. In the depths of the Morlock tunnels, as the mutants are enjoying their cookout, a sudden eruption of screams and gunfire shatters the peace. The Morlocks barely have time to fathom the cause before the Marauders strike, merciless in their mission to wipe out the Morlocks. Meanwhile, elsewhere, X-Factor recuperates from a recent skirmish with the Freedom Force, with Rusty nursing injuries. Cyclops takes charge, directing Marvel Girl and Angel to escort him back to base. Alongside them is Skids, a Morlock ally Rusty recently befriended. Remaining behind, Cyclops, Beast, and Iceman embark on a search for Artie, who ventured into the tunnels earlier to find Rusty and is now lost. Their quest is interrupted by the sounds of carnage ahead, drawing them into a grim scene where Marauders Harpoon and Arclight massacre the unsuspecting Morlocks. In a desperate bid to save lives, Beast confronts the Marauders as Cyclops and Iceman are embroiled in the resultant battle. As the Marauders Arclight and Harpoon are fleeing, Arclight uses her powers to bring the roof down. Cyclops uses his optic beam to minimize the damage, managing to rescue Morlock's arrogant, beautiful dreamer. As Angel, Marvel Girl, and Skids escort Rusty back to base, Skids grapples with the tangled web between the Exterminators and X-Factor, seeking to unravel their connection. It's only when Angel and Cameron Hodge begin attending to Rusty's injuries that Skids learns the true clandestine nature of X-Factor. Disconcerted by mutants masquerading as mutant hunters and the potential fallout on human-mutant relations, Skids resolve to return to the safety of the Morlock tunnels. Marvel Girl, sensing the urgency below, employs her telekinesis to block Skids' escape, recognizing the need to address the brewing turmoil. Meanwhile, in the depths, Artie, Leech, and Caliban strive for safety but face a sudden assault from Sabretooth. In a frantic scramble, Artie and Leech manage to slip into a sewer pipe, but Caliban falls victim to Sabretooth's vicious claws. Unexpectedly, Cyclops, Iceman, and Beast cross paths, focused on their own mission. Oblivious to Artie and the others, Cyclops engages Sabretooth in combat, forcing the vicious assailant back momentarily. As Artie attempts to reach out to them, Leech, unable to recognize their allies in the chaos, intervenes, believing them to be a threat. The tense situation narrowly averts disaster as they pull Caliban into the safety of the pipe just as Sabretooth regains consciousness, vowing to hunt them down and exact revenge. In Washington, D.C., Freedom Force observes Trish Tilby's news broadcast with a sense of triumph as their leaked information linking Warren Worthington III to X-Factor is aired. Tilby's diligent investigation enables her to unveil on television that Worthington is covertly backing X-Factor. This revelation spreads rapidly, catching the attention of Candy Southern during a board of directors session at Worthington Enterprises. Simultaneously, at the X-Factor compound, Warren confronts the reality firsthand as he and his teammates attend to Rusty's medical needs. Amidst the relentless massacre of the Morlocks by the Marauders, a Morlock named Plague finds herself facing imminent death at the hands of Harpoon and Sabretooth. However, her fate takes an unexpected turn when Apocalypse intervenes, rescuing her from certain demise. In a moment of ominous prophecy, Apocalypse reveals to Plague that he sees immense potential in her for his future endeavors and promptly teleports her away to a destiny intertwined with his grand schemes. Meanwhile, Artie becomes acutely aware that Caliban's life hangs in the balance without urgent medical attention. Utilizing his unique abilities, Artie endeavors to trace Cyclops and his companions in a bid to secure help for Caliban. In the X-Factor compound, tension simmers as Rusty's recovery teeters on uncertainty. Angel experiences a profound realization, acknowledging that masquerading as mutant hunters under X-Factor's guise was a misguided approach destined for failure. This revelation weighs heavily on Jean, who shoulders the blame for the tumultuous events, breaking down in tears as she confronts the repercussions of her return, particularly on Scott's life. Warren offers solace to Jean in her distress, but their moment of understanding is shattered when Candy enters unexpectedly, misinterpreting their closeness and abruptly severing both their personal and professional ties with Warren before storming out in anger. Amidst this upheaval, Angel grapples with conflicting priorities but ultimately resolves to prioritize the greater cause. As Jean expresses her intent to return to the tunnels, Angel makes the decision to accompany her, recognizing the gravity of the situation and the necessity of their united effort. Deep below ground, the Marauders, Blockbuster, and Vertigo launch a vicious assault on Morlocks, Ape, and Tar Baby before the timely arrival of Cyclops, Iceman, and Beast. Though initially caught off guard by the malevolent mutant's formidable powers, the trio manages to incapacitate Vertigo, forcing Blockbuster to retreat with her, thereby saving Ape and Tar Baby from certain doom. In the dark depths of the Morlock tunnels, Cyclops, Beast, and Iceman confront the formidable trio of Arclight, Scrambler, and Prism, ready for battle. However, the odds quickly turn against them as Arclight's devastating blows knock out Cyclops and Beast. Just as Prism prepares to deliver a fatal blow, Marvel Girl and Angel swoop in, unleashing Marvel Girl's potent telekinetic abilities to shatter Prism into irreparable fragments, ending his threat permanently. The sudden turn of events sends Scrambler and Arclight scrambling for an escape, fleeing the scene. Amidst the chaos, Iceman suffers a grievous injury, losing his sight in the intense confrontation. With the situation dire and no other options available, Angel makes the tough call to separate from the group. He directs Iceman, Beast, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, and the surviving Morlocks to proceed without him, while he continues his search for Artie and any other potential survivors, determined to ensure no one else falls prey to the ongoing violence in the tunnels. Angel's stroke of fortune leads him to Artie shortly after, but his respite is fleeting as he's soon discovered by Harpoon, Blockbuster, and Vertigo. Urging Artie to flee, Angel braces himself for the onslaught but is swiftly overwhelmed. Blockbuster seizes him, viciously targeting his wings, while Harpoon utilizes his energy-charged weapons to immobilize Angel, pinning him to the wall by his injured wings. Trapped and defenseless, the merciless Marauders converge, closing in on a trapped Angel. Banding together. In the X-Mansion, the New Mutants are alarmed by a roar coming from the X-Men's wing of the school. Recognizing the roar as Lockheed's, they decide to investigate. Upon arriving, they discover that Warlock, Magic, and Cypher are already assessing the situation. Lockheed has seared a hole in the wall leading to the elevator that descends to the mansion's lower levels. Cannonball takes charge, blasting down first and urging the rest to follow him. Meanwhile, Mirage steps outside to check on her horse, Brightwind. As she steps out, she's horrified to see the apparition of death hanging over the mansion, signaling the end. On Muir Island, Moira McTaggart is startled by the sudden arrival of Illyana Rasputin. Illyana teleports Moira away, intending to return them to the mansion. As she's still learning to master her powers of teleportation, the two inadvertently travel and end up stranded in limbo. Moira finds the hellish realm terrifying. Attempting to comfort her, Illyana conjures up a scrying pool and shows Moira what's happening at the mansion. Seeing Moira's fear, Illyana unapologetically explains that Belasco's influence made her this way. Eventually they get back to Earth and arrive at the mansion as the other New Mutants find Lockheed in the hangar of the mansion. The scene is chaotic and the tension escalates as the X-Men return, beaten and bashed. They bring with them wounded teammates and Morlocks, all casualties of a brutal attack by the Marauders. The New Mutants rush to assist the wounded, and Illyana is horrified to discover that Kitty can't re-solidify herself. As Storm reiterates the horror the X-Men witnessed with their own eyes, she prepares the school for battle. As McTaggart points out that they don't have enough equipment to handle an all-out battle, Storm tells her that the war has just begun and that there's no other way. She instructs the New Mutants to follow McTaggart, and the X-Men are to set up a perimeter outside the school. The New Mutants do their best to help as Sunspot pushes himself to the brink of exhaustion. In his fatigue, he nearly drops a crucial life support module, prompting Magneto to berate him. Magneto sternly orders Sunspot to step aside if he can't provide effective help. The situation becomes even more tense when Sunder, a Morlock, learns that the on-site doctors need to amputate his leg. Overcome with anger and fear, Sunder lashes out. Magneto steps in, trying to calm the panicked Morlock, and asks Karma to help control him by using her powers. However, as Karma connects with Sunder's mind, the memories of her own torments in Vietnam flood back, forcing her to disengage. Psylocke then intervenes, using her telepathic abilities to immobilize Sunder, allowing the doctors to proceed with the amputation safely. Mirage is overwhelmed by visions of death looming over both the Morlocks and the New Mutants. Distraught, she goes to Cannonball, breaking down into tears as she shares her grim premonitions. Sunspot, still angry about being ejected from the makeshift infirmary, stomps into the kitchen. He finds Rain, who's been diligently preparing food for the injured mutants and helps himself to some food without asking. This infuriates Rain, and the two begin to argue heatedly. Their confrontation escalates into a physical altercation that stops only after Cannonball and Mirage intervene. The two leaders chastise them for their immaturity, reminding them that there are far more important matters at hand. Chastened, Sunspot and Rain pause to survey the mess they've made of the kitchen. Realizing the truth in Mirage and Cannonball's words, they acknowledge their mistake and refocus on the urgent needs of their friends and teammates. Outside in the rain, Cypher notices Warlock scanning the area intently. Cypher asks Warlock what he's looking for, as Warlock evasively responds with nothing, but Doug isn't fooled for a second. Inside, Karma tries calling her siblings, growing increasingly worried when she receives no answer. Magic apparates into the room, interrupting her, and is frustrated that she failed to heal Kitty in limbo. Hearing this, Karma shares her worry about her siblings' lack of response. Illyana offers to help by teleporting her to the house. house. As they turn to leave, they run into Cypher and Warlock. After explaining where they're headed, Cypher and Warlock sense potential trouble and quickly inform Mirage and Cannonball of Magic and Karma's plans. Together, the team quickly assesses the situation, ready to support their friends in whatever challenges they might face. Magic and Karma reach Karma's apartment only to find it eerily deserted. Karma tries to switch on the lights and accidentally triggers an explosion. Back at the mansion, the New Mutants grow increasingly worried when they can't reach Karma and Magic by phone. Deciding not to burden the X-Men with the problem, they choose to handle the situation themselves. Magma uses her powers to burn a path to the hangar for the young mutants to sneak out. Warlock transforms his body into a car, providing a safe means of transportation for the group. They drive off toward the city, unaware that they're being followed by Warlock's father, Magus. As they cross the Morlocks tunnels, the New Mutants witness the devastating aftermath of the Marauders' attack. The signs of death and destruction are everywhere, forcing them to confront the horrific reality of the massacre. Despite the grim scene, they manage to reach Karma's siblings' apartment. As they emerge, the sight of the damaged building heightens their anxiety. Their fears for Karma and Magic are quickly alleviated when Mirage notices Magic nearby with Karma, both of them alive and well. Relieved but still on edge, Warlock continues scanning the area for threats. Suddenly, his sensors detect danger and he scoops up the New Mutants, making a run for the sewers. In the depths of the sewers, Magus introduces himself and launches an attack on the team. The New Mutants are caught off guard as the Magus seizes them all, threatening to administer the transmode virus. Just before the situation turns dire, Magic quickly teleports the group away to safety. Enraged by their escape, Magus resolves to hunt them down and kill them, setting the stage for an even more intense confrontation in the future. A god among men. After a long break, Thor is returning to Earth when he's suddenly struck by a mystical force. Unable to see his attacker or ascertain the consequences of the assault, he decides to press on and swings his hammer so fast, it breaks the dimensional barrier between Asgard and Midgard on Earth. Arriving above New York City, Thor heads toward Brooklyn, where he has an apartment under his civilian guise, Sigurd Jarlsson. Intent on checking Surtur's realm of Muspelheim, Thor attempts to use Mjolnir to break the barrier between worlds like he did with Earth, and finds his path blocked by a magical force. Frustrated, he retires to his apartment, but the sparse impersonal space feels unwelcoming. Realizing he needs solitude to ponder his next move, he decides the Empire State Building would be a better place to think. While atop the Empire State Building, Thor witnesses a mugging in progress. He swiftly intervenes, disarming the mugger and ensuring the safety of the victim until the police arrive. As he watches the scene unfold, Thor contemplates the daily struggles humans face with mortality. He marvels at their resilience, pondering how they cope with the constant presence of death, a concept almost alien to a god like himself. In Asgard, Heimdall and the Asgardians are diligently crafting a new sheath for Surtur's sword, a critical step in securing the weapon for its prophesied wielder. Meanwhile, two young boys, Mick and Kev, awaken in an unfamiliar home. They're greeted by the imposing yet jovial Volstagg, who Thor had entrusted with the boys' care. Volstagg, with a heavy heart, tells the boys that their mother is no more. As he gently breaks the news, the boys react with disbelief and sorrow, struggling to accept the harsh reality of their loss. Back on Earth, Thor, now in his mortal disguise as Sigurd Jarlsson, decides to reconnect with the humans he befriended while he was on Earth. He stops by a construction site in Lower Manhattan to meet with the foreman, Jerry. Sigurd shares with Jerry that he recently lost his father. As he admits that he doesn't know a lot of people or have family close by, Jerry makes the executive decision to cut the workday short and literally drags Sigurd to his house for dinner. Jerry takes Sigurd to his house in Cobble Hill, where Thor is introduced to Jerry's large family, his wife Tina and their children Ernesto, Pietro, Giovanni, Maria, Rosa, and Gabriella. Despite Tina's initial reservations about the unexpected guest, Jerry convinces her to let him stay for dinner. Sigurd bonds with the youngest, Ernesto, playing with him. After a hearty meal, Sigurd even helps with the dirty dishes. As the evening grows late, the Sapristi family invites Sigurd to spend the night. After a bit of convincing, he agrees, much to their delight. In the throne room of Asgard, Munin swoops in with a single black feather clutched in its beak, presenting it to Balder, who has assumed the role of king following Odin's passing. Viewing the ominous black feather as a foreboding sign, Balder summons Heimdall and entrusts him with the task of safeguarding Asgard while he delves into the mystery surrounding the feather. The following day, Sigurd treats the Sapristi children to a day at Central Park, where they explore the zoo and enjoy the outdoors. As they relax in the park, Sigurd recounts a tale of Thor's younger days. He recounts an adventure where Thor, fresh from vanquishing frost giants, encountered a frozen lake with a boat helmed by a mysterious ferryman called Harbard. Despite Thor's demands for passage, Harbard steadfastly refused, warning of his formidable magic and ability to sow discord. Frustrated, Thor took the longer route around the lake, only later discovering that Harbard was none other than his own father, Odin, in disguise. Sigurd shares with the children the lesson his father sought to impart: the importance of self-reliance. He explains that even when faced with challenges or deceit, One must trust in their own abilities and judgment above all else. As the children are Sigurd for another story, the frog Puddle Gulp arrives as Thor is elated to see his four-legged friends. The children are amazed not only by the frog's ability to communicate, but also by their familiarity with Jarlsson. Sigurd explains that these frogs are old friends of his, adding a touch of whimsy to the moment. The frogs share troubling news with Sigurd, prompting him to abruptly announce his departure to the children. Surprisingly, the children reveal that they know his true identity as Thor. Astonished, Sigurd listens as they recount how their father suspected Sigurd was a superhero, and they caught a glimpse of Mjolnir in his gym bag while he was doing the dishes. Promising to keep his secret safe, the children watch in wonder as Sigurd transforms into Thor and goes into the sewers below the city, ready to face whatever challenges await him. Puddlegulp's alarming news about a massacre in progress propels Thor into action, prompting him to investigate the grim situation. Unbeknownst to Thor, his movements are being monitored in Hell by none other than Hela, who's revealed to have cast a spell that was the mystical force that attacked Thor as he was entering Earth, an attack whose effects Thor is soon to discover. As Thor ventures deeper into the sewers, he encounters the tragic aftermath of the Marauders' attack. Nearby, X-Factor's Angel cries out in agony as he's ruthlessly pinned to the sewer walls by Harpoon of the Marauders, with Blockbuster inflicting additional torment by picking his feathers. Thor rushes to Angel's aid upon hearing his screams, only to be confronted by Blockbuster, Vertigo, and Harpoon. Despite their combined efforts, they prove no match for Thor, who forces them to retreat with a display of his thunderous power. The sight of Angel suffering is heart-wrenching, but Thor's relieved to find that Angel is still breathing. Before Thor can free Angel, the Marauders regroup for a counterattack, forcing Thor to brace himself for a battle to protect Angel's life. Powerhouse. The Power Children and Franklin Richards stay up later than usual, glued to the television with James and Margaret. They're eager for news about the spaceship that had whisked them away recently, but instead, the broadcast focused on the Exterminator's recent assault on the X-Factor complex. Disappointed, the children exchange murmurs about their distaste for X-Factor, considering their friends in the superhero community are mostly mutants. In a playful moment, Alex teases Jack, prompting Jack to chase Alex into another room. Jack, wielding his newfound gravity powers, uses them to playfully evade Alex. However, Alex cautions him against openly displaying his abilities, as others might misconstrue them and alert groups like X-Factor, presuming them to be mutants. As the evening winds down, the Power parents usher the children off to bed, tucking them in snugly. Franklin expressed a longing for his own parents, but Margaret gently explained that they might not return until the following day. The children are abruptly awakened from their slumber by a vivid illusion of their Morlock friend Leech, cradling his injured comrade, Caliban. Startled by the vision, Alex quickly wakes Jack, Franklin, Julie, and Katie. In a flurry of excitement, they don their superhero costumes and hatch a plan to sneak out of the house and venture into the depths of the Morlock tunnels to investigate the mysterious occurrence. As they descend to the ground, Alex reminisces about a time when he temporarily acquired Jack's gravity powers, enabling him to fly using wings he'd fashioned for his costume. Despite Jack's initial disdain for the wings, Alex insisted he take them along for the journey into the sewers, foreseeing potential advantages in their underground exploration. Deep within the Morlocks realm, the children are drawn by the echoes of screams, leading them into a grim scene. The marauder known as Scalp Hunter mercilessly fires upon a group of defenseless Morlocks as part of a sinister scheme to eradicate the weaker mutants. Bullets whiz dangerously close to Leech and the unconscious Caliban, whom he struggles to drag to safety. As the Power Pack navigates the tunnels, they encounter the aftermath of a brutal massacre, each lifeless form a chilling testament to the carnage unfolding. Their horror mounts as they realize someone is systematically targeting the Morlocks. Before they can press on, they're ambushed by the savage Sabretooth. Despite his ferocity, the children valiantly defend themselves until they can escape, using Destroyer's energy blast to seal off the tunnel behind them. Their narrow escape leads them to Wolverine, who grimly informs them of the ongoing slaughter in the sewers, urging them to flee to safety. Promising compliance to appease Wolverine, the children secretly resolve to continue their quest to find Leech. Along the way, they stumble upon the lifeless bodies of Anna Lee and her children, a macabre sight that sends shivers down the spines. Jack speculates grimly that X-Factor may be involved in these heinous murders. At that very moment, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, and Iceman arrive at the X-Factor complex with the surviving Morlocks, Ape, Urg, and Tar Baby. Skids is overjoyed to see some of her friends alive amidst the chaos. Once the Morlock survivors are safely settled, Cyclops decides to venture back into the perilous tunnels to search for Angel and locate Artie. Marvel Girl, recognizing the danger, insists on accompanying him, stressing the importance of not going alone into the tunnels. Back in the tunnels, the Power Pack locate Leech and Caliban, only to encounter the Marauders, Arclight, Scrambler, and Harpoon. Despite the Marauders' formidable prowess, the young heroes hold their own in the skirmish, showcasing their growing abilities. Jack even manages to momentarily incapacitate the super-strong Arclight, turning the tide of the battle. However, just as things reach a critical point, Cyclops and Marvel Girl intervene, forcing the Marauders to retreat. With a momentary respite, the Power Pack breaks the tragic news to Leech about Annalee's demise. Leech's grief resonates deeply with Cyclops, reminding him of the pain he caused his own son by leaving Nathan and Madeline to join X-Factor. Seeking to uplift Leech's spirits, Cyclops promises to reunite him with the other surviving Morlocks. He entrusts Iceman and Beast with escorting Leech and Caliban to safety, while advising the Power Pack to return home. Before departing, Jack seeks clarification on X-Factor's involvement in the massacre, to which Cyclops reveals that the perpetrators are a group called the Marauders. Satisfied with the information, the children ascend to the surface. Before parting ways, Jack demonstrates a new skill he acquired using his powers, symbolically discarding the ruined wings given to him earlier and returning them to Alex. Thunder strikes. Thor discovers Angel in the Morlock tunnels, his wings cruelly harpooned to the walls but still alive. As Thor attempts to free him, they're confronted by the Marauders, Blockbuster, Harpoon, and Vertigo, intent on killing Thor. Despite their formidable mutant powers, Thor repels them with lightning summoned from Mjolnir. Once they retreat, Thor releases Angel. Upon regaining consciousness, Angel anxiously inquires if Artie made it to safety. Thor is unsure, and Angel, feeling helpless, doubts it. In despair, Angel begs Thor to leave him to die, but Thor steadfastly refuses. As the tunnel's structural integrity fails, Thor carries Angel to safety just before it collapses. In distant Asgard, Balder treks through an endless desert, guided by the raven Munin. When he senses the presence of the one he seeks, he calls out, and a giant sand serpent appears. Unfazed by the serpent's faint strike, Balder watches as it transforms into one of the Sisters of Fate. She understands his quest. He seeks water from the Well of Life. She grants it to him, warning that it's a gift bestowed only once. Balder takes the vial and explains that Munin's brother Hugin ventured into Muspelheim but didn't return. Using the single feather Munin brought back, Balder pours the precious water over it, resurrecting Hugin. Reunited, the two ravens perch on Balder's shoulders. When Balder turns to thank the Sister of Fate, she's vanished. With his mission complete, Balder commands the birds to accompany him back to Asgard. Back in the Morlock tunnels, the Marauders near completion of their grim mission to exterminate the Morlocks. Harpoon recounts their encounter with Thor to Sabretooth, both mocking the big man Blockbuster for his prowess against the Morlocks, but his failure against Thor. Annoyed by the ridicule, Blockbuster decides to venture deeper into the sewers, seeking a rematch with Thor to prove his strength. Meanwhile, Thor, walking through the tunnels, finds young Artie. He persuades Artie to follow him to the surface when suddenly, Blockbuster ambushes them from above. Blockbuster lands on Thor's arm with such force that it breaks, giving the Marauder the upper hand. He begins mercilessly pummeling Thor. Regaining consciousness, Angel leaps onto Blockbuster from behind, but this leaves his wings vulnerable to further injury. As Blockbuster continues his assault on Angel, Thor is left with no choice but to strike Blockbuster directly in the face with Mjolnir, killing him. With the battle over, Artie uses his power to project an image of Cyclops and Marvel Girl. Thor recognizes the figures but can't quite place them, understanding only that Artie seeks these people. Back in Asgard, Mick and Kev are struggling to come to terms with their mother's death. Volstagg offers them comfort and takes them downstairs to meet his family. There, they're warmly welcomed by Volstagg's wife, Hildegund, and his children, Alaric, Rolf, Gudrun, and Fosi. The Asgardian family's instant acceptance and genuine excitement to meet mortals from Earth provide the boys with the support and solace they need to begin coping with their loss. In the sewers on Earth, Thor, Angel, and Artie encounter Cyclops and Marvel Girl. As Thor hands Angel over to them, the winged mutant insists he isn't worth saving. But they refuse to accept this. Thor finally recognizes Cyclops and Marvel Girl as members of the original X-Men he once fought alongside against Lucifer years ago. Noticing Thor's broken arm, Cyclops uses his optic blast to create a makeshift sling. After ensuring Thor is taken care of, expressing concern for the dead, Thor mentions his intention to give the dead Morlocks a dignified Viking funeral. As Cyclops, Jean, Artie, and Angel depart, Thor ponders how his arm could have been broken. Suddenly, Hela appears, revealing she's exacted her revenge for her previous defeat by cursing Thor. She explains that his bones are now brittle and will never heal if broken, ensuring he can never die. With a gale of sinister laughter, Hela vanishes, leaving Thor to contemplate his grim predicament. Enraged, Thor smashes his hammer onto the ground, unleashing a torrent of lightning that surges through the Morlock tunnels, turning the remains of the deceased Morlocks left behind by the Marauders into ashes. As the last traces of the bodies are consumed by fire, Thor stands amidst the dark aftermath, pondering the uncertain path that lies ahead. Wolverine vs. Sabretooth. Wolverine prowls through the Morlock tunnels, searching for survivors in the aftermath of his encounter with the Power Pack and battle against Sabretooth. The tunnels are littered with dead bodies, and as he navigates the grim scene, he scares off rats that come to feed on the corpses, knowing they'll return once he leaves. Suddenly, Psylocke, the new telepath at the X-Men's mansion, contacts him telepathically. She tells Wolverine that Storm has requested a status report and reminds him of his mission to bring back at least one hostage. Wolverine responds that the situation looks bleak and assures her he'll comply with with orders and deal with the remaining Marauders after securing a hostage. Cutting off the communication, he steels himself for the work ahead. Psylocke feels a twinge of irritation at Wolverine's condescending attitude, but quickly shifts her focus to the survivors of the massacre. Meanwhile, in the mansion's medical center, Moira McTaggart, Sharon Friedlander, and Magneto are desperately trying to save another critically wounded Morlock, but their efforts are in vain as the Morlock succumbs to their injuries. Each death weighs heavily on both Callisto and Storm. Callisto confides in Storm, expressing her belief that, apart from the X-Men, no one cares about the Morlocks. Storm, in turn, feels a similar despair about the X-Men themselves. She glances at her injured teammates, Nightcrawler and Shadowcat. Shadowcat trapped in a phasing state and rapidly becoming a living ghost. Listening to Colossus speak about killing the Marauder Riptide in retaliation for Nightcrawler's injuries, Storm reflects on how far the X-Men have fallen. The notion that such a noble group could resort to killing overwhelms her, and she breaks down, rushing out of the room in tears. Storm runs across the Xavier property, her emotions in turmoil until she reaches the lake. There, she dives in and swims away, seeking solace in the water as she releases her pent-up feelings. Colossus attempts to follow Storm, but he collapses from his injuries after encountering Psylocke. Down at the entrance to the Morlock tunnels, Rogue and Tom Corsi stand guard, vigilant for any Marauders who might approach the mansion. Psylocke, pinned under the unconscious Colossus, telepathically calls Rogue for help. Responding quickly, Rogue lifts Colossus off Psylocke and sets him down gently. Psylocke then sends Rogue to the lake to search for Storm, hoping she can help the distressed leader find some peace. In the sewers, Wolverine relentlessly tracks the Marauders' scents while keeping an eye out for survivors. As he navigates the labyrinthine tunnels, he unexpectedly picks up the familiar scent of the original X-Men, now X-Factor. The surprising discovery leaves him momentarily stunned, but before he can ponder it further, he's attacked from behind. Back at the mansion, Magneto and Moira McTaggart examine Colossus's inert body. Assessing the damage inflicted in battle on his armored form, Magneto decides to use his powers to attempt a repair. Despite successfully restoring Colossus to consciousness, the Russian mutant remains paralyzed, leaving Magneto and Moira puzzled and deeply concerned about his condition. In the sewers, Wolverine spins around to face his attacker, Sabretooth, eager for a rematch. In Sabretooth's grasp is the Morlock healer, still alive and potentially crucial for aiding the injured back at the mansion. Sensing an opportunity, Wolverine taunts Sabretooth, provoking him into dropping the healer and engaging in the next brutal round of their ongoing battle. Meanwhile, Rogue searches for Storm but comes up empty-handed. Callisto suggests Rogue return to the mansion while she continues the search. Rogue hands Callisto Storm's vest, instructing her to return it if she finds her. Callisto eventually discovers Storm on a neighboring property, having stolen a dress from a clothes line. When Callisto urges Storm to resume her responsibilities, the X-Men's leader bolts into the woods. Determined, Callisto catches up and forces Storm into a confrontation, compelling her to fight. Meanwhile, in the sewers, Wolverine and Sabretooth continue their fierce clash. While Sabretooth's sole focus is on killing Wolverine, Logan is determined to save the Morlock healer. Seizing an opportunity, Wolverine collapses part of the tunnel to create a barrier between himself and Sabretooth. With the healer in his grasp, Wolverine sprints through the tunnels, racing to get him back to safety. On the surface, Callisto finds Storm and implores her to set aside her personal turmoil and embrace the responsibilities she assumed as leader of both the X-Men and the Morlocks. Moved by Callisto's words, Storm agrees to return. Wolverine arrives at the X-Mansion with the injured healer. He enlists Rogue and Tom Corsi to help carry the healer out of the tunnels. They manage to escape just as a powerful surge of lightning scorches through the Morlock tunnels, obliterating everything in its path. Surveying the devastation, Rogue remarks grimly that if anything had survived in the tunnels before, it's almost certainly dead now. As Beast and Iceman navigate the Morlock tunnels, carrying the injured Leech and Caliban, headed to the X-Factor compound, they're ambushed by a group of Morlocks led by Mask. This group, comprising Blowhard, Scale, Face, and Berserker, mistakenly believes them to be Marauders and launches an attack. Initially, the fight is chaotic and difficult due to Leech's power-nullifying presence, which affects everyone nearby. Realizing they're outnumbered and at a disadvantage, Bobby sends Leech away, allowing them to regain their mutant abilities and stand a fighting chance. Elsewhere in the Morlock tunnels, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Artie, and a severely injured Angel are making their way back to the X-Factor compound. This encounter with the Morlocks left Angel gravely wounded and led Scott and Jean to cross paths with the Power Pack and Thor before finding Artie and Angel. Artie remembers Angel had given him a message to relay to Jean, and he projects an image of his experiences in the Morlock tunnels. During this, Artie unexpectedly picks up an image from Angel's mind and shares it with Scott and Jean. The image reveals Angel and Jean sharing an embrace. Initially jealous of Jean and Angel's budding romance, which sparked a flash of jealousy in Scott, he resolved to let the two live their lives and not get involved in it. Scott blames himself for Warren's predicament and then reassures a worried Artie that he'll be fine. They soon come across the battle between Beast, Iceman, and the surviving Morlocks. Cyclops intervenes with an optic blast, breaking up the fight and restoring order. Scott then invites the Morlocks to join the other rescued Morlocks, but the group declines, revealing a rift within their community: the Drain Dwellers, those already rescued by exterminators, and the Tunnelers, who stand before them now. Initially, the Tunnelers reject Scott's offer, but Mask points out that they suffered losses during the Marauders' attack just like the Drain Dwellers. Berserker, who initially rejected the exterminator's offer, takes one look at Leech and is swayed. The Tunnelers agree to follow the exterminators to the compound where the rest of the surviving Morlocks are. They explain that they learned about the outside world through Berserker, who can pick up radio and television transmissions with his powers. They also question if X-Factor are the Marauders, but before Cyclops can clarify, Caliban wakes up. Remembering the massacre of his people, Caliban tries to return to the Morlocks' home but is stopped by Beast. Caliban vows to avenge his fallen friends against the Marauders. Suddenly, a cleansing lightning storm, courtesy of Thor, sweeps through the tunnels, incinerating the dead and forcing everyone to flee to safety. Upon arriving at the X-Factor compound, Berserker and the other Tunnelers discover that the exterminators are actually X-Factor. Before they can attack again, Skids and the Drain Dwellers convince them that the exterminators' mutant hunter guise is a ruse to help mutants in using the powers effectively and induct them into human society. Meanwhile, a media circus and police presence gather outside, spurred by the revelation that Warren Worthington III has been secretly financing X-Factor. As an astonished public looks on, Warren is taken out of the compound by ambulance. Inside, the Tunnelers decide they don't want to stay. Using Mask's powers, they disguise themselves as cleaning staff and slip past the police blockade, ready to start new lives on the surface. They stop at a dilapidated pier on the Hudson River, intending to cross over to New Jersey. However, they're confronted by muggers. Hoping to scare them off, the Tunnelers reveal their mutant natures by shedding their disguises. This proves to be a fatal mistake when one of the muggers shoots Blowhard. Enraged, Berserker and Mask kill the muggers before they can escape. At St. Vincent's Hospital, Scott and Jean arrive with Angel, who's rushed into emergency surgery. While waiting, Jean and Scott see a news report about the murders on the pier and learn that the police have cornered the mutant attackers, who they deduce are the Tunnelers. They quickly change into their exterminator costumes and rush to the scene, hoping to save the remaining Tunnelers before there are any more casualties. At the paraplegic ward of the Veterans Administration Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, Abraham Kiros faces his final day confined to an iron lung due to a severe military injury. Suddenly, Apocalypse materializes before him, offering him a chance at the greatest honor, to become his newest horseman, War. With a single touch, Apocalypse vanishes, taking Abraham with him and transforming his destiny forever. Back in New York, Cyclops and Marvel Girl arrive at the chaotic scene. Jean uses a telekinetic shield to keep the police at bay while Scott commands the Tunnelers to surrender. Berserker refuses, and in a desperate attempt to escape, Scaleface transforms into her giant lizard form. Panicked, the police open fire, gunning her down. As she reverts to her human form in death, Berserker is driven into a rage. Blaming the exterminators for their plight and vowing to kill every human he sees, he unleashes his powers with devastating fury. With no other choice, Cyclops blasts Berserker off the pier and into the water, causing an explosive overload of his powers that results in his death. Jean reassures Scott that he had no choice, but Scott remains troubled by the day's avoidable losses. Barely alive, Mask is carried away by Scott and Jean using her telekinetic abilities. As officers approach Scaleface's lifeless body, the officer who shot her is horrified to realize she was just a girl, adding to the grim toll of the confrontation. Meanwhile, in a loft just past Times Square, a young mutant thief named Boom Boom hands over a purse loaded with one of her explosive time bombs to her boss, Vanisher. When Vanisher fails to appreciate the prank, Boom Boom realizes he lacks the sense of humor her friend, the Beyonder, possesses. Fed up with Vanisher's demeanor, she decides to sever ties with him. Before leaving, she warns him to stay away from her, threatening to report him to X-Factor if he doesn't heed her warning. Scott and Jean finally return to St. Vincent's Hospital, where they receive devastating news from the doctor. Despite their best efforts, the doctor informs them that Warren's wings are beyond saving and will have to be amputated. Dare to Kill. After the tragic deaths of the Morlocks and the subsequent incineration of their blood and bodies by Thor, a group of local teenagers decide to explore the now abandoned tunnels. However, they soon encounter Sabretooth, who's now claimed the tunnels as his own territory. Sabretooth swiftly injures one of the teenagers, prompting the two boys to flee in terror. Left behind is the girl who had accompanied them. Sabretooth seizes her and throws her onto what he now considers their shared bed. Satisfied with his dominance, Sabretooth scans the area with his heightened senses to ensure no immediate threats are present. He then settles down to rest, preparing himself for the inevitable confrontation with the X-Men that lies ahead. Daredevil is patrolling the city, his radar sense and enhanced smell and hearing keenly attuned to his surroundings. He detects a commotion, but quickly realizes it's just two dogs fighting over scraps in the trash. After briefly observing the encounter, his attention shifts to a more pressing matter: a nearby robbery. Two muggers are attempting to steal from a man, but Daredevil intervenes swiftly, overpowering and tying them up. However, the victim, a store owner, is not grateful. His shop had been damaged during Daredevil's battle with the super soldier Nuke. Caught off guard, Daredevil struggles for words. He knows he's not responsible for Nuke's actions, yet he can't ignore the reality that the presence of superheroes often draws supervillains to the city. At home, siblings Darla Darla and Butch are watching a horror movie on TV. Just as a werewolf is about to attack a woman on screen, Butch decides to annoy their cat, causing it to leap at Darla's face right when the werewolf strikes. Naturally, she freaks out and starts to beat the laughing Butch. Their parents intervene, telling them to knock it off. The kids then ask for their allowance so they can go to the library. Before they leave, their father warns them to stay away from Raphael and his gang of troublemakers. Despite this, it isn't long before they're seen hanging out with Raphael and his crew. The gang has made their way into the subway tunnels and has started to get comfortable, making the tunnels their spot. Each member is assigned their own turf, but a dispute arises when two of them fight over a particular spot. The commotion wakes Sabretooth, who interrupts their bickering with a menacing roar. He confronts the gang of kids and teenagers, and they're all terrified. Raphael, the leader, cowardly hides behind the others, but Butch, one of the smallest, bravely stands up to Sabretooth. He tells Creed that New York is protected by superheroes like Daredevil. Intrigued and irritated, Sabretooth decides to teach the kids a lesson by challenging Daredevil himself. A while later, Daredevil is still patrolling the city when he catches a peculiar scent reminiscent of both a man and a tiger. Before he can react, Sabretooth launches a surprise attack. The two tumble off a rooftop, landing in a nearby alley. Ironically, the same one where the two dogs had fought earlier. In the alley, Sabretooth strikes again, causing Daredevil to inadvertently collide with some bystanders, an elderly couple. As Daredevil rushes to aid them, Sabretooth viciously claws at his back. Enraged, Daredevil retaliates with expert combat maneuvers, attempting to lure Sabretooth into the underground pipes and sewers, where he believes his blindness gives him an advantage. However, Sabretooth, who has feline-like night vision, is also capable of turning the darkness into his advantage as well. The intense battle rages on, with both adversaries exchanging powerful blows. Their fight brings them close to where the girl is tied up. Daredevil attempts to free her, but Sabretooth strikes from behind once more, aiming to end Daredevil's life. In a split-second reaction, Daredevil employs a judo move, causing both of them to crash into a nearby wall. The impact reveals a hidden compartment containing a charred Morlock corpse, shedding light on the grim events that transpired in these tunnels. When Butch and Darla return home, Butch is appalled by the cat's behavior, who arrives with a rat in its mouth without killing or eating it. Puzzled, Butch questions why the cat behaves this way. His father explains that the cat is following its natural instincts. It craves the excitement of the chase, but doesn't necessarily need to consume the mouse since the family regularly feed it. Understanding this, Butch starts to feel a twinge of sympathy for the cat's predicament. However, his empathy is short-lived. In a sudden turn of events, the cat swiftly kills the mouse and dashes away. Butch is left feeling deeply upset by the cat's actions. In the tunnels, Sabretooth is taken aback by Daredevil's unusual response to the discovery of the corpse. He notices how the hero tilts his head and sniffs the air, finally realizing that Daredevil relies on senses other than sight. He must be blind. Impressed, Sabretooth begins to speak. Daredevil warns that one of them will end up dead if they don't cease their conflict. But before any resolution can be reached, Sabretooth abruptly slashes the throat of the girl they were fighting over. Enraged, Daredevil unleashes a barrage of blows on Sabretooth until he can confirm the girl's condition. To his relief, she's still alive, though severely injured. Daredevil questions Sabretooth's brutal act, but Sabretooth is unable to provide a coherent answer. He then flees the scene, mirroring the swift escape of Butch's cat earlier. Left alone, Daredevil tends to the girl's wounds and ensures her safety. New blood. After the evacuation of the surviving Morlocks from the tunnels, Psylocke, the newest member of Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, seeks to make herself useful in the wake of the Marauders massacre. Using Cerebro to extend her telepathic reach, she contacts Rogue, who's patrolling the mansion's grounds. Rogue reports that everything's quiet and admits that she's feeling fine, albeit a bit bored. Elizabeth extends her telepathic reach to the lower levels of the mansion, checking on those in the makeshift infirmary. She first monitors the wounded Nightcrawler and Colossus before turning her attention to Shadowcat. Despite the risk of phasing out of existence, Shadowcat seems to be managing well, which deeply saddens Psylocke. Shifting her focus, she scans the wing of the school designated for the new mutants. She notices a picture of the youngest students at Xavier's and is reminded of Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher, and his affection for her. She reflects on how he risked his life to save her from the Mojoverse and ponders her own feelings for him. Meanwhile, in the remnants of the Morlocks tunnels, Callisto, Storm, Wolverine, and Magneto survey the area. A mysterious lightning force has eradicated all the dead bodies, as well as any evidence of the Marauders or the missing new mutants. When Storm realizes that lightning was used, Callisto becomes angry, and both women question if Storm's supposedly lost mutant powers were involved. Regardless, they're unable to trace either the Marauders or the new mutants, which frustrates Magneto, as the younger students are his responsibility. Psylocke reaches out to them telepathically, offering to use her abilities to scan the planet for any sign of the missing groups. Storm, however, instructs her to focus on mansion security instead. When Wolverine questions Storm's reluctance to use Psylocke's talents, Storm explains that they can't afford to make mistakes by relying on unknown factors. Psylocke continues scanning the mansion perimeter when she detects an intruder on the property, attempting to read their mind. She's suddenly overwhelmed by their strong psi shields, momentarily forgetting that her telepathic power is being amplified by Cerebro. The intruder is revealed to be Sabretooth, who swiftly overpowers Rogue and breaches the mansion's defenses. At the mansion, Sabretooth attacks Psylocke, who temporarily fends him off with a powerful Psycho Blast. Despite this, he manages to slash her arm with his claws. Determined to protect the infirmary and its patients, Psylocke lures Sabretooth deeper into the mansion, eventually leading him onto the roof. There, they crash through the ceiling of Storm's greenhouse, where Psylocke attempts to defend herself with Storm's knife. Their battle is interrupted by the arrival of Storm, Callisto, Wolverine, and Magneto. As Wolverine and Sabretooth engage in a fierce duel that spills outside the mansion, Magneto prepares to subdue Sabretooth with improvised bonds. However, Psylocke intervenes, explaining Sabretooth's psi shields. She suggests that while Sabretooth is distracted by his fight with Wolverine, she can attempt to probe his mind. Psylocke's plan succeeds, allowing her to probe Sabretooth's mind and uncover the identity of the Marauders' secret leader. She quickly relays this information to Wolverine as their battle moves toward the lake at the edge of the mansion grounds. Just as the other X-Men arrive to assist in capturing Sabretooth, the feral mutant dives into the lake, with Wolverine in hot pursuit. Despite their efforts, Sabretooth manages to escape. Psylocke, unable to detect him, confirms that he's eluded them once again. In the aftermath of the battle, the decision is made to transport Callisto, the injured Morlocks, and the wounded X-Men to Muir Island for continued care under Moira McTaggart. Wolverine suggests to Storm that Psylocke has proven herself to be a capable member of the team. Storm agrees, and they invite Psylocke to join the X-Men. Grateful for the opportunity, she accepts and is warmly welcomed as their newest member. Malicious intent. As Lila Cheney and her band deliver yet another sold-out performance, Dazzler, secretly posing as the keyboard player after being outed as a mutant, struggles to keep Malice under control. Despite her efforts, Dazzler's coerced into using her powers on stage, unintentionally stealing the spotlight. After the show, Lila confronts Dazzler, warning her against using her abilities during performances. Lila makes it clear that not only will Dazzler be fired, but she also risks blowing her cover by revealing her true identity. Allison, suspecting that Lila might be jealous of her superior musical talents, retorts that Lila should enjoy her fame while it lasts, as she plans to claim the top spot soon. Later, at Professor Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, Storm, Rogue, and Psylocke work to repair Cerebro, which was damaged by Sabretooth. Although Psylocke is hard on herself, Storm and Rogue reassure her, reminding her that it was a rookie mistake and she'll be better prepared next time. When Psylocke asks if they'll be ready should the Marauders attack again, Storm admits she doesn't think so. Rogue then decides to step outside for some fresh air. Storm inquires about Wolverine and Callisto's whereabouts, and Psylocke informs her that they're in a training session. Attempting a Psylink to contact Wolverine, Psylocke is shocked to discover that Wolverine and Callisto are actually fighting. When she suggests intervening, Storm calmly tells her that there's no danger. Their session concludes with Callisto barely managing a kill shot. She informs Logan of her intention to hunt down the Marauders and avenge those they killed, repaying the debt to the survivors. Later, after cleaning up, Logan checks on Cerebro's status. Noticing Psylocke is on edge, he playfully tries to spook her with his claws, only to receive a telepathic jolt in return. When she scolds him, Logan explains he was merely ensuring she hadn't lost her edge after battling Sabretooth. Psylocke convinces him that she can handle herself, but their conversation is interrupted by a ringing phone. Logan answers and discovers it's Lila, calling to report Dazzler's recent troubles. Wolverine, Storm, Rogue, and Psylocke journey to Dallas, where they discover Dazzler performing at a private club. They observe that the atmosphere in the club is tense, with everyone seemingly on edge and ready to explode at any moment. While acknowledging Dazzler's capability as an adult to take care of herself, the X-Men feel compelled to warn her about the Marauders and the potential threat they pose to those associated with them. To their surprise, Dazzler spots them and launches an attack, expressing relief that they've arrived. This unexpected turn leads to a confrontation between the four X-Men and Dazzler, who, unbeknownst to them, is under the influence of Malice, a member of the Marauders. As they overpower Dazzler and restrain her, Malice abandons her host and possesses Wolverine instead. Caught off guard, the X-Men are stunned as the Malice-controlled Wolverine tries to kill Dazzler. She defends herself by knocking him out with laser blasts from her eyes. Meanwhile, outside, the escalating battle attracts the attention of the police SWAT team. The club owner informs the officer in charge that Dazzler is causing havoc inside, leading the officer to question whether this is true or merely a hallucination induced by drugs. Back inside, Malice swiftly jumps to possess Rogue, who then heads outside to confront the authorities. Still unaware of the possession, Storm wonders if Dazzler's Dazzler's behavior is contagious. Betsy delves into Dazzler's mind and uncovers the truth. Rogue and the others are under the influence of Malice, a marauder. The team devises a plan to defeat Malice. Since Rogue's mind is psi-resistant, they decide to use a psi-link to combat Malice. Psylocke suggests possessing someone with whom she shares a strong psi-link, believing this will allow her to defeat Malice. Despite Dazzler's offer, Psylocke opts to use Storm as bait. Storm agrees, with Wolverine reassuring her that he'll handle Malice if the plan falls short. Outside, the Malice-possessed Rogue easily handles the SWAT team and proclaims to the media that she's allied with the X-Men. Just as she's about to further tarnish the group's reputation, Dazzler intervenes, provoking Psylocke to strike her with a potent Psybolt. This attack forces Malice to abandon Rogue's body and possess Storm as intended. However, Storm proves to be a challenging host for Malice. Through sheer determination, Storm removes the choker that usually facilitates Malice's possession of others. She confronts the villain, attributing her defeat to Malice's desire to exploit the dark sides of individuals, a facet of herself that Storm had long embraced and integrated. As a result of this realization, Malice appears to dissipate in the aftermath of the battle. After the battle concludes, the X-Men and Dazzler discreetly exit the private club and observe the police activity outside. Curious, Dazzler questions Storm about why the Marauders targeted her. Storm speculates that Dazzler's powers and her friendship with the X-Men made her a prime target. Feeling guilty for inadvertently causing the X-Men to be discredited and blamed for the chaos, Dazzler expresses her remorse. Storm reassures her that the X-Men are resilient and will weather the storm. In a gesture of protection, Storm invites Dazzler to join the X-Men, which Dazzler accepts. However, the moment is interrupted when Logan suddenly attacks Storm, believing she's still under Malice's influence. After the others pull Logan away, he realizes his mistake but insists he sensed Malice's presence. Psylocke uses her telepathic abilities to confirm that Malice is no longer present among them, easing their worries. Nonetheless, the group remains uneasy from the ordeal. Wolverine suggests that if they can't trust each other, the X-Men should disband, but Storm refuses to give up without a fight, determined to overcome this challenge together. From a vantage point high above, Malice, now in control of the SWAT team leader, observes the group below. She reflects on Storm's words of resilience, acknowledging their bravery but finding Wolverine's words more truthful. Malice takes pleasure in knowing that her manipulation has eroded the trust the X-Men once had in each other, seeing it as a potential catalyst for their downfall. Marvelous verdict. Mutant Massacre undoubtedly paved the way for crossover events that Marvel Comics is known for. From introducing Mr. Sinister, who would turn out to be one of the major big bads for the X-Men, to crossovers with other Marvel characters like Thor, Power Pack, and Daredevil, Mutant Massacre single-handedly changed the history of X-Men comics and the medium as a whole. Considered to be a cult classic, this comic series by Chris Claremont has captured the hearts of both old and new readers. Consider this video as a sign to check this series out, or if you've read it, do leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts.